to another episode of Word Up with Dani Katz. I am so blessed to be joined by Vincent James, who we all know as the belligerent, I might be mangling this, Agorist, belligerent
Agorist, yeah.
Agorist.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've had the pleasure of being friends with Vincent on social media for a little while now. And over the past couple weeks, there's been all this hullabaloo around Roe. And I put up a video offering my 2 cents, and then Vincent responded calling me in on some of my ignorance about the Constitution and civics and whatnot. So I thought it was really the perfect opportunity to bring Vince on and help break this down and fill in some of the holes that my United States standard issue education did not resource me with. So Vince, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this, and thank you for the opportunity. I did catch your interview with Frank. I love Frank, quite frankly, and kudos to you. It's a great interview. It went really well, and I am looking forward to reaching an audience with a brain, because the problem is a lot of people they don't want to apply their mind to figure. It's not that difficult to figure it out. You just have to assume every time a government entity is talking to you that they're lying, because they usually are. So with that in mind, let's proceed with the agenda. And I'll will either go to the notes, or if you have questions that you wanted to ask.
I have a bunch of questions, and I'm really happy to go off your notes. Just so everyone knows, Vince did a lot of pre-prep, and he's coming very prepared. I'm curious to know a little bit about you, and as far as your background and how you came to be so knowledgeable about common law, constitutional law, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, go briefly. I was raised in New Jersey, and I literally grew up in the shadow of the revolution. From where I lived and where I grew up, within 50 miles was about 90% of George Washington's battle sites or campsites. There's placards all over the place that say George Washington slept here. My father had a love of history. We would travel every summer up to Boston, Massachusetts. I've been on the Freedom Trail. I think they call it the Liberty Trail, Freedom Trail, in Boston about a dozen times. I've been to the Constitution Hall, been to the Liberty Bell, been all over Boston, where most of the founding fathers really started the whole thing with. And there's a lot of untold history that I saw as a young child. So I was enamored with our history. Then I joined the Navy, and I moved to Florida, got married, made a big mistake, married the wrong girl, and ended up being harassed and nearly destroyed by 20 years of child support enforcement division over a child that wasn't even mine biologically. So I've been, I guess you could say, harassed and harangued and beaten the crap out of by government my entire life. So it kind of pushed me toward educating myself. And about 15 years ago, I began learning the common law. And recently, and I think I shared with you a resource, commonlawyer.com, that I recommend to every one of your listeners that they're curious about the root of the Constitution, the context of the Constitution. They check out this gentleman's work, commonlawyer.com. And from him, I've learned so much. And I will preface by saying that Joseph Story, who is a Supreme Court justice, turn of the century 1900s, said that you can't even understand the Constitution if you don't know about the common law. And I'm learning more and more every day as I study it. That is so true. Like, for example, and I'll give it back to you. The phrase law of the land, that comes right from the Magna Carta, which is where we trace most of our liberties back to. That's Latin, the word lex terrae, which literally means law of the land. And when the colonists heard that word, heard that expression, they knew that that was referring to a set of rights that were ours all the way back to the Magna Carta. Mm-hmm. So that's a little trivia for you on the common law. So Joseph Story said you can't even interpret the Constitution without an understanding of the common law. And so that's where the journey for me began with the common law. I began to dabble into that 15 years ago. And now there's a lot of thankfully, a lot of really great people, pioneers. I consider myself a newbie compared to people like Christopher James of warriorcalls.com. There's Alphonse Fajolo, which is a brother from another mother up in Pennsylvania. He's on a website called IamHasSentMeToYou.com. Then, of course, there's Carl Lentz, who is his website is theloresociety.com. There's so many great people teaching it now, but I'll give it back to you in a minute. But this book right here, you can see it. This is a book called The Excellence of the Common Law, 900 pages long. So, you know, the judges on the benches here on Taos County and all over the state will tell you the common law is gone, it's done with. But the reality is, Dani, there is more of a history to the common law as the law of mankind than there is to what they call civil law, which is their law. That's only been around for about 150 years. The common law goes back to 300 BC. So we have a long history of practicing the common law, and really what it boils down to is common sense. The simple principle of common law is that all of us inherently know right from wrong, and we inherently can judge any matter of law, and a jury is the ultimate decider of what law really is, and we've lost that. We got to get back to that, and that's why I work with the Assembly, because we're trying to reconvene our common law jural system where we can empower you and me, anybody else who wants to be involved in fixing this mess that we've had created here on American soil by bringing all these matters like Roe back before the people and letting the people decide what the law will be. And that's the common law. It's the law of the people, what the people say. So back to you.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for all your service in course correcting our nation. I'm curious, when you say that it's impossible to understand constitutional law without understanding common law, how many of our current active lawyers, judges, et cetera, have a working understanding of common law?
That's just it, Dani. They don't have any understanding. The bar stands for the British Accreditation Registry, is out of the City of London. It's part of the triumvirate, the Vatican, City of London, and of course DC being the military. And they have basically unlawfully usurped our public courthouses. And what they're doing now is they've introduced a private foreign society, a legal society called the bar, into our common law court system. And they've taken it over. And they basically have done away with the common law. And so the bar they don't train them anything about common law, because they're part of a private legal society that is basically communist in its agenda, and they want to supplant religion and law with a private law that doesn't deal with men and women having rights, but they just deal with the law as they see it. So, a little piece of history, there's two 13th Amendments. Most people don't know this, but the first 13th Amendment was passed around the early 1800s, and it was probably one of the main causes for the War of 1812. The British wanted to get rid of it. What it did is it outlawed any foreign title like Esquire, which is what lawyers are. They're esquires. It's a title of nobility from the crown. The Queen gives them that title, and they practice her form of law, not the law of the land that the colonists fought to bring us during the Revolutionary War. So to answer your question, why don't they know, or what do they know about the common law at all? No, they don't, because they seek to supplant that and replace it with a form of law called civil law. It's based on Roman civil law, Babylon, which has nothing to do with human rights, doesn't acknowledge your individual inalienable rights at all. It seeks to control and subjugate. So the problem we have in America, one of the biggest problems as I see it, is we have to get to a place where our population, and that's why this broadcast is so important, that our people are once again brought to a knowledge of the fact that there is a different kind of law available to them that they can directly control. And they can sit on a jury and they can actually they can nullify a law. They can look at a law that the lawyers wrote and they can say, we don't like that law, or in this case, it doesn't apply. We're going to strike that law down and throw this case out and not even hear the evidence. Or they can also, as a common law jury, they can see the evidence and they can rule on the facts and say, based on the facts of this law, or this case, we're not going to convict this client. And that's called jury nullification. And that's one very effective way of us chipping away at all these bad laws through the common law, through common law juries.
Okay, and I have so many questions, and I'm like inclined to kind of jump around and go back to Roe, but since we're on this, I'm curious, like, given that the people who think they're in charge and who are wielding their false power are ignorant of these things, that seems to me like a big breakdown. Like I like you, first got turned on to this whole conversation in 2015 when I took a sovereignty class at Spawn Ranch, the old Manson ranch. And
oh, really?
That was my first go at like switching up my status. And for me, that experience attracted more cop energy than I had ever attracted. And when I would use my little catchphrases, it only pissed them off and got me into more trouble, because that the people in those positions are so like fundamentally disempowered that they just defer to like false power, brute force. And for me, it really turned me off, because it was like, well, unless I can educate the whole world as to the fact that I'm in alignment with these countries' ideals, this isn't really working for me.
Correct. Yeah, that's a big problem. We have the same problem with the assembly that I work with, the American Assembly Project. We talked about that, and I'll provide you a link to that. Right now, here on Taos County, we're particularly dealing with some bullying from the sheriff's department. They are stepping into an area that's not even their jurisdiction, involving themselves in the serving of civil warrants. And there's a difference between a civil warrant and a grand jury warrant for, say, a felony. Like, let's say you murder somebody or rape somebody or steal somebody's property. That's a trespass or property trespass, and that's arrestable offense. But a traffic offense or a statutory violation, those are not arrestable offenses. And so they've overstepped their jurisdiction, and they are attempting to arrest one of our assembly members over a civil bench warrant regarding, get this, the unlawful mask mandate that Grisham had. And in fact, the day that she was arrested, there wasn't even a mask mandate in place. It was the period between when it had gone off and then when it came back. Yep. It was in that period in between. And they arrested her at the courthouse for not wearing a mask. And the thing, this is a good way to segue into the whole question about Roe, because there's a Supreme Court decision going back to 1803 called Marbury versus Madison that every American should be familiar with. Have you heard of it?
I only heard about it in your notes, but can you please, catch us up to speed?
So basically it said, this is 1803, and basically the Supreme Court said that any law that's repugnant to the Constitution, in other words, if it's opposed to the Constitution, it's unlawful. And it's unlawful from the beginning of when it was put forth. There's no need for a repeal. Here's what people understand. Part of the mask mandates and the vaccine mandates and the social distancing, these are all unconstitutional laws. They are not in alignment with the Constitution. For example, here in New Mexico, Article 2, Section 3 of our state constitution says that the people of this state possess the sole and exclusive right of self-government. Mm-hmm. Now, how can you be self-governing if some arbitrary town council, I call them the clown council here on Taos, they can get together and have a closed Zoom meeting and say, hey, guess what? Y'all got to wear a mask and suffocate yourself. From the very minute they said that, that law was unconstitutional. Therefore, according to the Supreme Court, it creates no office, no court's bound to enforce it. There are no liability protections for those who seek to enforce it. In other words, their ass is hanging out to dry because they can be tried for any number of crimes, and we intend to do that. because they broke the law. They denied everybody in Taos County due process by just deciding that we're going to make all you people suffocate yourself, right, over a non-existent virus.
Right.
Doesn't matter what the views are about COVID. They don't have the right, and they stepped over the line, and they violated the Constitution of the state and the federal Constitution. So therefore, no one's obliged to obey that law,
Right.
period.
But what do we tell these crooked sheriffs, these crooked cops, like everyone who's on the payroll, who's enforcing? I mean, just the fact that these meetings happen behind closed doors is in violation of the Open Meetings Act. And I just want to, for anyone who's watching and who is inclined to hold these people liable, I am willing to share every single email that I have sent our governor, our city council in Santa Fe, and our mayor, giving them facts and figures, that they have willfully ignored. But given this, this level and all these layers of collusion, who is going to enforce actual constitutional justice?
The only people that can do that, Dani, is we the people. And we have to, and that's why I work with the assembly. We have to assemble, the First Amendment right of peaceably assembling. I've been looking closely at that. It has nothing to do with making a placard, going on the street corner, standing there saying, hey, I'm upset about this, I'm upset about that. Has to do with assembling your own government, okay? In colonial times, the time of the drafting of the Constitution, they already had all these things. And I'll give you some proof. At the Civil War, when the Civil War ended, the generals wanted to find a place where they could meet and sign the peace treaty. And they chose the McLean Ranch. But they don't call it that in history. You can go in Virginia, it's called the Appomattox Courthouse. It's actually a ranch. It's a private residence. But that was where the people assembled their court system. See, they already had all that. The Constitution didn't create any of that. It's silent for the most part, except for the Seventh Amendment mentions suits of common law, acknowledging the fact that the common law was in existence at that time, but it didn't create any of those systems. They were already in place. The problem was the Civil War. They all got bombed out and never got reconstructed. So the assembly is busy rebuilding all that. So to answer your question directly, the answer is people need to rise up, realize their own power, realize their own ability and their own right to self-govern and self-determine their own destiny, their own future. Assemble, join their assembly, find a place to serve, and get involved. And we can then, when we get all of our counties reseated and all organized, we can, in every county, assemble a common law jury. We can meet grand juries. We can issue indictments. We can bring these people in on their crimes. And using our militia, which is part of our assembly, a jury pool, same jury, militia, same thing. They're synonymous. Those terms are interchangeable. If you're in the jury, you're a member of the militia. If you're a member of the militia, you're in the jury.
Wait, can you unpack that piece? Because when I think of militia, and I know that law terms are quite different than like our sort of civilian understanding. But when I think of militia, I think of people armed with weapons. So am I just misunderstanding that word, that a jury is synonymous with militia?
No, that you're perfectly understanding it. That is, we the people. The Second Amendment exists, well, it says right in the context of the Second Amendment, the security of a free state being essential, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Well, we have a right to bear arms. Why? Because we are supposed to be providing security for our free state. We shouldn't be leasing it out or subcontracting it out to Pinkerton cops. These guys, most of them are PTSD damaged, anabolic steroid addicted rage heads. They're unfit to carry a weapon. I would much rather have my neighbor be armed, trained in how to use those arms, and ready to respond at a moment's notice to any threat. For example, the Summer of Love riots. How do you know Trump is part of the cabal? Here's how. Because when those riots happened, he had the authority to call up the militia to quell that riot, but he didn't do it. Why? He's not on our team. He's not playing for us. He's not one of us. He's part of the cabal. It's all part of they're all actors. So the militia is supposed to be the peacekeeping force for a community.
Mhm.
Who better? Who better? I have a book, part of the series by Brent Ella Winters. There's this one on don't talk to the police.
Mhm.
There's this one on the jury. There's this one on the Constitution, and one more that I've lent out on the militia, where he says, and this is confirmed by my history in going to Boston as a child, the Minutemen, ever heard that phrase, the Minutemen?
Yes.
At the Lexington Concord Green, when the
Yeah.
British came and said, throw down your arms, who resisted them? That was the militia. It wasn't the police. There was no police. That was the militia. Militia did that.
Interesting.
Who fought the Revolutionary War? The militia did that. The Continental Congress called up the militia and appointed Washington as the commander-in-chief, and the militia fought the war with the help from, of course, from France, and the Indians actually helped us too. But we're supposed to be doing our own security for our communities. That's part of the assembly. That's part of what we're trying. We have what we call the 4 pillars of our assembly.
Mhm.
And one of them is the jural assembly, which is the court. One of them is the militia, because we provide security. So those roles are interchangeable. If you're one of the people, you're obliged to be armed and be able to respond to whatever threat there is. We all know now that there's Supreme Court cases that have come out and told us that the police are not there to protect you. Well, then why are they there? They're there to keep you in line with the ruling class. They are not your friend. They are, in the words of Mark Passio, who you may know, I don't know if you know him or not.
Yeah.
They are the boots on the ground for the New World Order. That's what the police and military are. They don't work for us anymore.
No.
Okay. And people need to wake up as that and reassemble and pull up your own bootstraps and self-govern. Take back our country. And that's what the assembly is doing peacefully. We're not advocating violence. We're not saying go shoot the cops. We're not saying that. We're saying join your local assembly, get educated on how to assert your rights. Because if you don't know how to assert them, you don't have any, period. We have a seminar at the assembly called Constitutional Enforcement Seminar, where we teach you how to enforce your rights.
That
Now, we
feels
haven't
really
yet.
valuable.
Yeah, extremely. So
Yeah.
getting back to Roe, since we want to bring that in because that's how we got in this chat, right? The Roe versus Wade decision really was a political thing. Most people realize that now. Okay, the Supreme Court is they're not the final say about what the law is, but the media makes them sound that way. Now, there is some merit to citing Supreme Court cases because precedent sometimes helps.
Mhm.
Because if you can look to a superior court and say, well, they said so, then you've got some room to stand, some leg to stand on. But the bottom line is, if you read the 7th Amendment to the Constitution, it clearly says that no court in the United States can overturn a decision of a jury trial, a common law jury trial. That is where all the power lies in we the people. And that's how the people exercise their power, by sitting in the jury and hearing the matter and deciding. So I think it's a good thing they threw it back to the states, because now we can assemble our states, assemble our juries, and we can decide.
Mhm.
I see it as a good, but they're stoking up the flames of discontent, and they're trying to use it as a political to divide and conquer. You know that.
Yeah.
I'm not telling you something you don't know.
Totally. And can you help like break down, because I know so many people are freaking out, and granted there's so much mind control manipulation going on, but I hear people who are more constitutionally educated than I am saying this is a wonderful thing and this is how it should have been from the get-go, and it was never the federal government's place to have any legislation around our body. Can you help
That's
unpack that a little
correct.
bit?
That's correct, because every state constitution has something like what ours is, Section 2, Article 2, Section 3, which says you have the right to self-govern. Every state, that's part of a Republican form of government. Article 4, Section 4 of our federal constitution says that the United States, that's the federal government, is supposed to guarantee to every state of the union a Republican form of government. And bodily autonomy, self-government, is part of a Republican government. It's a foundational thing.
Mm-hmm.
So they never had the business to say yay or nay either way.
Got it.
It was a politicized issue from the very beginning.
Okay.
And now they're just, I think it's cleverly orchestrated to divide us even further now. And I hope the American people will see through that and not get all stoked up and angry. Our anger should be directed at those who are trying to dominate and rule us. That's who we should be angry at, not at each other.
Completely. So I want to stay with the Supreme Court for a second and unpack a few other things. But I know that they also just made a decision about like EPA and carbon control that was another win for states. Right. So I'm curious to know from your perspective, that Trump's part of the cabal and in on it. And the timing of this is obviously political. But, these Supreme Court justices that we have now, are they in it? Are in on it? Are they operating out of some sort of like righteous and true and aligned devotion to the Constitution? Are they playing us as well?
I like Justice Clarence Thomas. I've always liked him.
Yeah.
I think he might be a straight up honorable man. Alito, same thing.
Mm-hmm.
This new one that doesn't even know what a woman is. She's clearly got an agenda.
Right.
Comey Barrett, I don't know. She's disappointed me with the whole election thing. She voted against the, clarifying the vote, and January 6th, the whole debacle that happened.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I can't. I'm not in their mind.
Yeah.
But I can tell you this: that they don't have the authority to make these decisions. We, the people, do. Mm-hmm. I sent you that chart. That's with the breakdown, right? The power flows, and this is also in the New Mexico State Constitution, Article 2, Section 2. All political power is derived and flows from the people, not from their elected officials. See, what happened in the Civil War is the Congress had been, up until those 7 states, eventually 11, walked out, they had been a de jure Congress. And I know you love words, so I'll throw 2 words at you: de facto and de jure. Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with these 2 words?
I've heard them, and I'm excited to hear you break them down.
De facto means fake. It means existing in fact, but not lawfully established. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that because there's no answer there. The answer is in de jure. The de jure means lawful, of law. De jure is juro, which means law. So de facto is existing in fact. It's there. It usually operates under a system of violence or coercion, but it's not lawful. De jure is lawful. So when the Civil War happened and 7 states walked out of Congress, Congress was reconvened by executive order. Sound familiar? Lincoln started all that.
Okay.
With General Order number 100, he reconvened Congress as a corporate de facto trusteeship, basically.
So Lincoln
he created the Public
out?
Charitable Trust. Yeah, Lincoln was a bad man. He's not at all what they say he was. He was a lawyer. He wasn't even eligible to run for office because the original 13th Amendment I talked about earlier, I didn't finish my thought, barred lawyers from holding office. Ooh. So under that amendment, nobody in Congress should even be there. Congress is now operating as a trustee, a board of trustees overseeing a bankruptcy of the largest entity ever in history to go bankrupt, the United States government. They are in bankruptcy.
Right.
So the problem is that the people need to reassemble our de jure government. I hope I'm making that point. De jure means proper. It means lawful. We, the people, If you read the Constitution, we the people, yada, 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 blah, 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 do ordain and establish this Constitution. Where did it all come from? We the people. So we the people are the answer. We the people are the ones who possess the power to reconvene our jural assemblies. And unlike a central government, that top-down power flows, right? It flows from the top down. Well, the way it's supposed to be in America is it flows from the bottom up. The people are the sovereigns. And there's a word. You were talking about how they use their word, they beat you with their words. They hate that word. They hate that word, sovereign.
They hate that word. That word gets me censored so often.
Oh my, I hate that word, but you know what? Supreme Court said in 1795, at the Revolution, the sovereignty devolved upon the people, and they are the sovereigns of this country. But they are sovereigns without subjects, with only themselves to govern. That's what a Republican government's all about. The people are sovereign, but they don't use political parties to beat their opponents up and say, do as I say. They govern themselves, and they come together in juries and get together and they figure out what works best. And it may vary from area to area. That's why a central government doesn't ever work, because you can't have a top-down hierarchy, because what works in Carolina might not work in Florida, right? Exactly. So the people, those areas have to figure out for themselves what works. And that's what made our government work so well. We had the ability to do that.
Yeah.
We have to get back to it. So
cool. Okay.
I encourage viewers out. The American State Assembly Project, the American States Assembly Project, TASA.AmericanStateNationals.org. Check us out there. That's the solution. The First Amendment is not about protesting, holding a sign up. It's about assembling your government, because we have been very, very, shall we say, lax in keeping our public servants accountable. And the answer lies in each one of us. It's our responsibility to take back control of our government. And that's how we do it from the ground up. Any questions? Let
me ask you, because I do want to jump back to Roe, but first, because you mentioned Mark Passio, and it was Mark Passio who turned me on to the etymology of government, meaning mind control. So do we really want to establish more and more government, even if it is by we the people?
We want to get away from it being a corporation. What we're dealing with now is a corporate structure that has been put in place by lawyers of the bar that operates under corporate motives. And a corporation's motive and intent is to what? To make money. Right. So we are forming the United States of America unincorporated. We work by committee, we work by people, not for profit. We're interested in restoring a government of the people, by the people, for the people. Mm-hmm. And the only way that's going to work for everyone is if everyone gets involved. So the difference is a corporation only has one goal: make money. And that's why politicians and lobbyists, that's why we're in the mess we're in. Every single town, every single county, every single state goes by a corporate name, and they trick us. It's semantic deceit. Like, for example, we have a bunch of guys, a bunch of bozos here on Taos at 105 Albright Road that call themselves Taos County Magistrate Courthouse. It's not a courthouse. It's a private, for-profit business. It has principals, shareholders, it has investors, it has officers, and their responsibility is to make money. That's why they're more concerned with having every single person with the wrong sticker on their car pulled over and fined and dragged into their court to pay, because that makes them money. But is there a crime being committed? No. I went to jail for not wearing a seatbelt because I don't want to have a license. And so that guy,
you not have no license, no registration? Is that how you're rolling?
That's how I'm rolling, yeah.
And
that's how you're roll.
Yeah. Okay. So how does that? So you, like you said, you just went to jail. So
yeah, because they're running They're running a for-profit justice system that profits from throwing people in jail. That there's a motivation for them to throw people in jail.
Was there a moment where they let you go and threw the case out and apologized and asked you not to sue them?
Not quite apologize, but Jeffrey Shannon, who was the next level up above Ortega, looked at my case and he could see from the evidence that there was no evidence on the record to support a criminal contempt charge, which is what Ortega threw at me. He didn't throw me in jail over the seatbelt. That's not really a jailable offense. He threw me in jail because I wouldn't submit to his jurisdiction. I wouldn't follow his order.
So what does that mean? What didn't you do?
He told me to stand behind the podium and answer as the defendant, and I refused to do that. I don't want to get too detailed, but he threw a contempt charge at me, a criminal contempt charge at me, hoping it would stick. It took my family 16 days to get me in front of a public defender and in front of Judge Shannon, who immediately looked at it and said, "This is a travesty of justice. There's no evidence to support this man being in jail for a minute, never mind 90 days. You're free to go." The case was dismissed. Explain that. But the only way to fix that is by taking back our courts. And the only way to do that is to outnumber them, to reassemble and outnumber them. Again, contact your general assembly, contact your state assembly, and find out how you can help us to end this tyranny, because we are being ruled by corporate dictates, corporate mandates. They don't give a rat's ass about your rights, Dani. I think we all know that.
Oh, yeah.
They're interested in making.
Yeah, so I really like what you're saying for a number of reasons. As I mentioned, I've been in and out of the sovereignty conversation for a while, and I've had my own personal issues. I like the grounded practicality of we need to outnumber them. I like this piece of we have a militia. You know, that makes sense. We're still peaceful, still devoted to peace. So I really appreciate that. I want to spend more time here, but jumping back to Roe. So one of the things that I had expressed concern about, again, from my limited understanding, I am not a constitutional lawyer or expert by any means, but I did hear that this was the first time that the Supreme Court rescinded or rolled back a constitutional amendment. So I immediately go to, well, what are they going to do about the Second Amendment? So am I like, where is my thinking erroneous here? And does this actually set a precedent that would give them opening to mess with the Second Amendment?